And oh my god, tactics on the board.
Wow. The explosive c4 is on the board by Carlsen, the world's #1 general manager, and it's the Champions Chess Tour semi-finals. His opponent, MVL, plays in response. The Great Snake variation does a little hiss. This is their round 1 game. What a match it is, and I'll let you know the results at the end. We now see g3 played by Carlsen. c5 on the board here. Both players tuck their bishops into bed. The symmetry's getting out of control. Will MVL carry on? No, he finally breaks it. We don't want the board to explode. And now, after Magnus pops a pony on the edge of the board, we had this classic from Tanya about where not to put your knights.
Knight on the edge, fall off the head.
Yes, never forget this one. Let it be ingrained in your mind. You don't want your knight to be falling into an I-file ditch, never to be found again. So we get knight c6 in response. Magnus now heads towards the center. d6 played, and he goes full b3 cowboy. Both players castle. Quick high five in recognition. The audience appreciate it. Rook b8 now played, and it looks for the queenside expansion. Magnus goes with this one. The bishops crossing swords, not advised in church. a6 now looks for the expansion. d3 sets up the triangle, and after bishop d7, queen d2, vavavoom. Maxime's the first one to get going with the pawns. The knight occupies the outpost here, puts pressure on the diagonal, etc. And we see some exchanges now. After this, Deuce has pushed, taking control of the square. Exchanges galore here. Queen recaptures. Magnus does similar to take control of d4, and we get the very natural rook f to d8, eyeballing the lady. All fairly steady-ish so far. How's Magnus going to mix it up? Look for winning chances. He starts with rook a to c1, and this is the moment that MVL decides to take. Change the structure. Open the eyes of his rook. Magnus captures this way to pressure the pawn on d6 there, but it's not covered. MVL doesn't play bishop e8, let's say. He plays knight to e5, hanging an entire pawn. But Magnus doesn't take it. Why not? We're about to dive in, but first, a big thank you to the sponsors of this video. Please do have a listen to this one. Do you notice anything familiar about this incredibly fun player versus player game, Castle Duels? The symmetrical board perhaps, the opposing army units placed one per square, the timer ticking as you decide on your next move. But unlike chess, you choose your army from over 30 unique 3D units. You choose the placement on the battlefield. You make the decision on whether to merge or even super merge your units, and you decide what ace to have up your sleeve by choosing your battle boost between rounds. And once your strategizing is done, it's let battle commence. Sounds simple, right? And it is, but the really fun part that I've found with this is piecing together your fighting force in the perfect combination to then go on to crush your opponent. So do not delay in checking out the brilliantly fun Castle Duels using the QR code on screen or the link down in the description, and you'll get a special welcoming bonus, special master chest bonus with gold, set of cards and magic dust, which can be exchanged for the legendary card. And also, if you sign up now, you'll be just in time to participate in the legendary Winter Wonderland event starting December 19th, and allowing you to collect decorative cards, earn unique rewards like Frost Knight, and try your luck with a festive roulette full of legendary prizes. So the pawn's under fire, and you can indeed take it, but this seems to be the follow-up point. Bishop c6, opening the rook, opening the bishops, and after the queen wins a second pawn, well, the counterplay comes here, and then g5 is critical, because wherever the knight goes, e2 is best. You can then land this check, supported by the knight on e5, the king goes, and there's some counterplay, right? Some dodginess around the white king. Now, taking the knight isn't best, because this one drops and white is better. You should actually drop back, apparently, and and you can then get some repetition. But the point being, black's got huge counterplay, maybe the rook's invading, light square, funny business. So that's why Magnus didn't touch the pawn. He instead goes rook fd1, bishop c6, played voluntarily. Now we see captures, knight takes back, and after knight d3, we see why, looking at the eval bar, black is slightly better here. You know, Magnus's pony is pretty clumsy. Where's it actually hopping to? All of the decent squares are controlled, unless you go back to where you came from. But then where are you hopping? So MVL starts running his pawn down the board, getting rid of that weakness. We get h4 in response, a4, sure you can capture, but you saddle yourself with a structure that only a mother could love, and therefore we get rook b1, captures is played, pawn takes back, and now rook b6, to my mind, screaming to be played, right? Stack the rooks, you do some defense here, who knows if knight a5 is on the way, gang up on that piddly little pawn back on b3. But rook a8 is played instead, also a natural move, taking the only open file, but almost the start of MVL going wrong. Now we get king g2, h5 played, queen e2, looks to activate on the light squares one day. This rook now attacks the pawn, but after knight f4, it meekly returns to base camp because that one was attacked. And now I love this moment, a real favourite of George Lucas. We get r2d2. Magnus wants to stack the two towers, and MVL really goes wrong now. What should he do here? Well, the best way to defend this pawn a bit more is with queen e7, and then you can activate the queen in different ways in the future, right? Who knows? But that was the order of the day. However, this guy decides to go walkies, but it is not a good idea, because after Magnus doubles the rooks, king e7, that is not where you want your monarch to be. In the crosshairs of major pieces, still a lot of material on the board. We're very much in a middle game. Queen f3 played to hit that knight. Rook a6 laterally covers, and now Magnus plays the first of some brilliant moves to come. The outlandish, swashbuckling rook d5. It's got no business being on that square, but here's the point. Because your king's in the centre, where it doesn't belong, you can take, well, you can't take, this didn't happen. If you take, this is what happens, you go to fork Vegas, right? Bye-bye queenie. So we come back here. The pawn did not take the rook. Instead, we see rook d7, and one of the challenges for MVL is he's massively committed on this plan now. You know, you can't change your mind, step back, or the pawn drops, and therefore you can't get the queen in. Very, very clumsy, big traffic jam. So queen e4 is now played, and the king is really in the crosshairs. Sets up tactics. You know, say you play a random move, rook b6 or something, then you can take here, you vacate the knight to this, to jump to that square, and then fork these two, of course. This is the point. This is why you can't take. So that's what MVL's got to fight against, but he does it in the wrong way. What should he do? Well, knight b4 is the best move because you attack the rook, but you also cover the square in general. So this tactic doesn't work, or you take, then when the knight hops, you take with the knight, etc. You also defend this guy. Very, very nice. Excuse me. But what we see in the game here is not knight b4, but knight e5. Yes, it interrupts the queen's attack on the king. Therefore, this pawn could maybe take one day, although you've still got problems. Not yet, but you block this thing here. However, it overlooks a different tactic, which Magnus finds now a brilliancy. Double exclams. Can you find the move here? Very well done if you saw. Rook takes on c5.
And oh my god, tactics on the board.
Wow.
Brilliancy, because if you recapture that one, well, we're going to see, because it's played in the game. But best, according to stock prawn, is actually rook a2 or queen f5, accepts the loss of the pawn, just go for some counterplay. But we see this one captured, given the question mark, because Magnus now takes here, and we see recaptures with the king, because we've talked about the problems of this. This one comes here. You just can't get out the forking way in time, and of course then your queen's going to drop off the board. Recaptures is illegal. So king takes was played, but now here's the nice point at the end. The sting at the end of the tail is queen b7 check. After the king goes, by the way, king d8 better. Now the rook drops here, queen f5 and queen c8 check. You know, presumably this is why the king should have been on d8, because now when the king moves here, you take again with check, and it's getting painful for black. It's like listening to Hikaru Nakamura try and remember the names of the Star Wars robots.
c4, e4, d1, h5, d2, h5, d2, h5, d2, h5, d2, h5, d2, c5, h5, d5, e1.
Rumour has it he's still trying to crack c3po. This king now moves up the line of fire, queen d4, something amazing about a centralised queen, the way it sprawls in every direction like a spider. Knight g4 goes for the counterplay. Don't move your pony. Well, you could go to here, I suppose, actually, and defend like that. But okay, not played. We get e4 instead, kicking the queen, and I love this. MVL slides it all the way over with a va-va-voom. Very, very eloquent. And after knight h3, yes, it's one step backwards, but it's one giant leap forward to kill the enemy. Queen b4 now pressures the pawn, but Magnus just carries on undeterred, going for the kill. Queen g7's on the way, so MVL doesn't touch this one. You just don't have time. He goes in with the kill. Queen e1 going for that pawn there, but it is currently covered, and you can actually play a very good attacking and defensive
Mushrooms
of queen a7 so that you hit here and defend at the same time. But okay, not seen. Magnus starts running this pawn here, very natural, but after e5 you do have to be a bit careful, because you can't go to c5 now and stay with the f2 pawn, can't go to e3 of course, can't take, and if you go here to cover, playable but a bit more passive. However, Magnus has seen he can land this check first. The king runs, now he slides back to laterally defend, and this moment now is the icing on the cake for Magnus, or the nail in the coffin for MVL. He plays f6. We see our overlord Fans Heingold wincing at such an awful move because it exposes the king, and bang, Magnus goes for the kill. Now we see the king run this way, right? If you go this way, well then you check and you box this king into the corner. You know, say you go here, this is a checkmate. If you go here, this is another kind of checkmate. You can do it in different ways. So this is why it runs out towards the center, but still we get the check, and you can see the power of the knight, the pawn, the queen combining, right? Doesn't matter where you run to, this knight is soon hopping in, or it's supporting queen checks and then hopping in if the king had gone to e8. But it jumps here immediately, the knight springs forward, now the king moves over here, check, king e7, and now what's the puzzle rush finish? How do you actually make the kill here? Very nice calculation from Magnus. Okay, easy for a glamour model of his standard, but still, he does it. He does the check. He hangs an entire knight, but we didn't see this. Resignation came because the point is this. You then slide just one square over and you're actually mating the king. It's completely caught in a net with the pawns and with its own pawn blocking it in. Really nice one that, and it set up Magnus to go on to win the match. MVL did come back in one game, but then it was all Magnus from there on out. So he makes his way to the final where he's going to face Jan Nepomniachtchi, and check out the video on screen for another incredible game of chess, or the link in the description if you want to do something completely different. Very fun game. Give it a go.
c4, e4, d1, h5, d2, h5, d2, h5, d2, h5, d2, h5, d2, c5, h5, d5, e1.